We're going to record this. Thank you so much, Shiva. I really appreciate that. So yeah, I had a friend who was a tech guy, and he, was great in many ways. But one of the things that she was looking at was, he didn't make that much money, which was fine, except the issue with that was she had planned on stopping work, basically. So she was 35, and basically she knew that if she were to get married right away, she was going to get pregnant right away, or that's her plan. You never know if you're going to get pregnant right away, right? But she wanted to have kids ASAP. And so she knew basically within, a year into their marriage, she might basically stop working. And so she was looking at his income, and she was like, well, it's just not sufficient for the type of life that I envisioned for ourselves, and the fact that I am planning on dropping out of work in basically a year, right? She was like, it's not enough to support a family. So, even though he was a really great guy, I mean, there were other issues that kind of led to the deterioration of them not working out, but it was a huge contributing factor. So this is the reason I wanted to have a masterclass like this and to start having these conversations, is because financial compatibility is really important. And in order to kind of ascertain financial compatibility, you need to understand your financial rights and your responsibilities within marriage, so you can figure out what you want, right? So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick. Eve and I were trying to figure out all the tech stuff before you guys hopped on, because we were getting confused. But here we are. Okay, so welcome to the Prenup or Not Financial Rights and Responsibilities Masterclass. We're going to talk about what are your rights and what are responsibilities that both men and women have towards each other when it comes to marriage. And this is specifically about financial rights, right? I'm not going to talk about other things because I'm not qualified to talk about other things. So we're going to focus on finances specifically. So the vibe of this masterclass, I'm laughing at the word vibe because Khaled, my graphic designer, was making fun of me because I use the word vibe a lot, and he's made me self-conscious about using that word. The vibe is, I love the word vibe. The vibe is, it's interactive. I want you to ask questions in the chat. If I pose any questions to you, feel free to, respond, share your thoughts as well. I want this to be as interactive as possible. I did open this masterclass for men. I don't know if men will be joining, but just be aware that that might be possible. But before we get started, I just wanted to do a quick intro for some of you who don't know me or may not be as familiar with me. If you have heard this intro already, I'm sorry, but I have to introduce myself to the newer people. But so my name is Melek. I grew up in Southern California. I graduated from the University of California, Irvine, which is actually the background in this photo. I actually have degrees in public health and international studies, and I just also wrapped up a master's program in international development in London. So you might be asking yourself, well, if you don't have a background in finances, why are you doing what you're doing? Which is a very valid question. I was lucky enough to take a financial literacy class when I was in high school, and that class literally changed my life. I was able to budget and invest and build my credit throughout my university years, which I know a lot of people didn't do. And then eventually I needed to start a side hustle because I was going to do my master's program and I was going to leave my full-time job. And I was like, well, I need some sort of income. So what do I do? And then I looked up whether financial coaching is a thing, and it turns out it was. So I went and I got trained and certified. On top of my certifications as a financial coach, I actually had to do a lot more research, obviously, because I was taught in a Western institution. So I had to go and learn all the Islamic stuff. So I've, read a lot of blogs and articles, attended a few Islamic finance seminars as well, in order to make sure I, have the full scope of what is permissible and what is not within our faith. I founded my business, Prosperous Financial Solutions, which is all about simplifying your finances. And I've been very passionate about personal finances for a very long time. And I grew up in Japan the first few years of my life. I know that's really random, but my dad got an opportunity to go do his master's and PhD on a scholarship there. So we lived there, which was really crazy. And no, I don't speak Japanese. Unfortunately, I left before I formally entered the schooling system there. But that's a little bit about myself. I've been doing this work for probably a year and a half now, and I really, really love it, officially. And now I'm pursuing this business for full time. And I love it, and it brings me so much joy to help Muslim women learn about money and investing and all the things. Why am I doing this masterclass? So if you've been following me, you probably saw that my reel on prenups went viral and it made a lot of people mad. I've linked it here. I'm not going to show it right now, but basically I was just talking about why you need to get a prenup. A lot of people got upset because they thought that prenups were like encouraging divorce, or, you know, a prenup is not fair to a woman, or it's not fair to the man, or whatever. And I think it was really that real when I saw people's comments, and I was like, oh, wow, there's a lot of misinformation about like what rights we actually are entitled to within marriage, both the man and the woman. And I think we need to have this conversation as a community, right? Because nobody really talks about it. Again, whenever marriage is talked about, it's always talked about in different contexts. It's not really talked about in the context of money and finances. So I was like, let's have this conversation. So that's what, you know, yeah, this reel and this reel was really just one of the pieces. A lot of the content I've done around marriage and relationships in general show me that there's a lot of misconceptions, anger, and frankly, entitlement around this topic. A lot of problems in marriage come from having different expectations and mindsets around money, but also not understanding your rights and responsibilities. So I already posted this in the chat earlier, but if some of you didn't participate, can you go ahead and tell me why you're here? I'll go ahead and read out some of the responses that folks have already mentioned. So mention why you're here and where you're from. So we have Sanya from Canada, Aisha from Texas, Zulaikha is from SoCal. She's here to learn how to have these conversations clearly and respectfully. Sadia is from Kentucky, and she's hopefully, inshallah, the talking stage works out and she wants to be prepared for marriage. So exciting. Inshallah, it works out for you, girl. Nokir is from Yemen to learn more about having her wedding next year. Beautiful. May Allah bless that for you. Ameen. Annika is here, excited to be here and learn with you all. Yay, wonderful. Sadaf is also a UCI grad. How cool. Who said vibe is a great world? Thank you for validating me, because yeah, because I've been getting really self-conscious. Let's see. Okay, does anyone else want to share? Steph is from Toronto. Amazing. So if you want to share why you're here, that would be great. I will read some more of those later, inshallah, but for the sake of time, I'll keep moving. But from what I gleaned so far, there are women who are currently either in the talking stages, or women who are single who want to learn, or women who are engaged and want to get married, which is amazing. May Allah bless everything for you, inshallah. Okay, let me put out a quick disclaimer before we dive into this. Obviously, I'm not a scholar, right? And I'm not an attorney. I'm not claiming to be either of those things. I'm just a financial coach. And what that means is I'm just here to educate, and I'm sharing information with you to the best of my ability based off of what I've learned from the Islamic finance seminars that I've taken. And if I say anything incorrectly, it's from Shaitan. And there are also some questions that, due to my lack of credentials as an attorney or as a scholar, I may not be able to answer. So I just want to put that out there. Also, I just want to mention that if you become upset, the topics we'll be talking about today are sensitive. If you become upset, I ask that you still act in a respectful manner, or I will have to respectfully remove you from the Zoom, right? So Hiba, my admin assistant, she is monitoring the chat, and she's going to see if anyone gets rowdy or rude or disrespectful, because we don't have place for that here. We are here to have a healthy and safe learning environment. All right. I see a few things in the chat. We have someone from Berlin, someone from Ohio. Very cool. I'm a relationship coach. Totally agree with you. We have a lot of misconceptions around this. I wanted to learn to help my clients. Beautiful. Amazing. Okay. Let's dive into it. The first thing we're gonna cover is basic rights and responsibilities. Okay. So what I'm gonna start out with is, the source of facts for our faith, right, which is what the Quran and Hadith say. So the famous Hadith that really talks about rights and responsibilities within a marriage is this one by Muslim Bukhari. So the Rasul says, every one of you is a shepherd and is responsible for his flock. The leader of a people is a guardian and is responsible for his subjects. A man is the guardian of his family and he is responsible for them. A woman is the guardian of her husband's home and his children, and she is responsible for them. All right. And then the verse in the Quran that talks about this is, men are the caretakers of women, as men have been provisioned by Allah over women and tasked with supporting them financially. Now, this verse is in Surah An-Nisa, this is the famous Qawamin force ayah, right? Qawamun al-Nisa. I'm not here to interpret that part, okay? We're not going to talk about that. I'm not going to talk about what that means. But I'm focusing on this part, which is what most people focus on, right? Tasked with those supporting them financially. So if you take both this hadith and this ayah in conjunction, basically, it's really well known that the financial obligation is on the man, right? Period. There should be no expectation that, of course, the woman is going to contribute, or of course, we'll split 50-50, which unfortunately I've been seeing more of. I think it's the concept of splitting 50-50 or contributing as a woman is in and of itself is not a bad thing. Obviously, it's more so the expectation that some men are coming in like, of course you're going to contribute, right? Because that's not the default. The default is he should come in knowing he's responsible, without expectation that his wife is going to contribute. Now, if his wife wants to contribute, that's amazing, right? What does it mean for a man to contribute? There really is no set standard, okay? It's hard to say because it's very dependent on context and place, but it should be according to his means, and he isn't necessarily supposed to provide a comfortable lifestyle, whatever that you interpret that to be. It should be dignified though. You should have a dignified life, meaning, you know, your basic needs are met. You should have, you know, generally agreed upon that you should cover your shelter, food, clothing, potentially transportation in the, you know, the times that we live in, because it's very much impossible to get around with that kind of these days, right? But there was a reel I made a few months ago where it was actually about this whole concept of there should be an expectation that, of course, the woman is going to contribute. And a lot of women became upset because they were like, well, it's not fair to the man these days, you know, like, you know, life is really hard, and a man by himself is not able to provide a comfortable lifestyle. The woman needs to work. And that's why I want to talk about this, because he's not supposed to provide a comfortable lifestyle. So he's not really supposed to provide, how do I say this? Like comfortable, meaning like the really nice car, like he's not supposed to have 6 figures. Like, I think our definition of what comfortable means, and especially in the West, has become really skewed. He's supposed to provide a dignified life. So what he's supposed to provide is actually not like amazing, right? It's supposed to be able to meet your basic needs and do what you got to do to live each day, right? So what a man will do is he'll tell his potential wife what his needs are, and if she doesn't want to work and contribute, she should let him know whether she's okay with his needs. Like, he's gonna be like, hey, these are my needs. So a friend was having a conversation with a man who kind of understood this concept, right? He was telling her, I forget what he did for work, but he was like, hey, listen, like, my income is this much. I'm happy to contribute. I'm happy to have us live a life according to this salary. But just so you know, if you want an upgraded lifestyle, I won't be able to provide that. You might have to contribute, right? And as a woman, she either is like, okay, that's fine with me, or she's like, you know what, your means are just not enough for me, unfortunately. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think as women, we have to get really, really clear on the type of lifestyle that we want. Because if you marry a man who doesn't meet, and you're not planning on working and contributing, if you marry a man whose lifestyle and whose means can't provide the lifestyle you want, trust that will build resentment in the future, right? And so my other friend who I started out this masterclass with, she literally looked at the potential man's means, and she was like, it's just not enough. Unfortunately, as much as he liked him, she was like, it's not enough for the life that I want. It's not enough for the fact that I'm planning on getting pregnant in a year. and my income's going to drop out. She didn't want to work anymore. And she's like, well, at youre, she was in the UK and he made around 30,000 pounds per year. And she was like, it's just not enough to support a family of 3. In London also. So she was like, nope, that's not going to work. And so that was like a deal breaker for her. So this is why I really want to focus on this, because a man is just supposed to provide according to his means. He's not supposed to provide that comfortable lifestyle, whatever that means for you, right? In general, it should be basic needs that he covers, and he tells you what his means are. And if you're okay with that, then you go from there. If you're not okay with that, you need to really sit and think about like whether you can overlook it per se, or whether it's actually a deal breaker for you. Now, when it comes to the woman, as we know, the woman does not have to work or contribute financially if she doesn't want to. That's her right. However, as we talked about in the hadith, a woman is the guardian of her husband's home and his children, and she is responsible for them, right? According to the Prophet ﷺ. So this is what this statement means, is really up to interpretation between the couple, right? But according to Sheikh Joe Bradford, if you guys are familiar with him, he is a scholar who is based out of the US. He has teachings, he has knowledge and background in Islamic finance specifically, and he studied at Medina, and he lived in Saudi for a very long time. So he's very, very familiar with Islamic finance, and he's typically the go-to for Islamic finance in the West. What that means is a woman's responsibility is to take care of the home, is to upkeep it and to nurture it emotionally, right? That doesn't necessarily mean she has to cook and clean, but it could, right? And I wish I can give you guys like a stronger, like, yes, she has to clean, or no, she doesn't have to clean. This is really up to interpretation. And I think this is like, first of all, men who tell you you have to cook and clean, that's not true, right? It's up to interpretation. You can both decide that what you being the guardian of your husband's home and his children and being responsible for them can mean cleaning, but it does not have to. And there are some narrations that even say that a man is technically should get his wife a cleaner or maid, for example. Oh, the audio is scratchy. Can you guys still hear me? Oh, so frustrating. Okay, give me 1 second. I'm gonna pause my video and get a new pair of earphones and see if that helps. All right, give me 1 second. Sorry, all technical difficulties.
Is this better, you guys? Can you let me know if you can hear me, if it sounds better? Okay, beautiful. Okay, sorry about that, guys. Thanks for letting me know that audio wasn't working very well. Okay, can I speak up? Okay, I will speak up, inshallah. Actually, let me know if it sounds better with earphones or without. Okay, let me take my earphones out.
Is this better? Is it better without earphones or with earphones? Better without? Okay, cool. Thank you, ladies. Appreciate that. Okay, great. So I'm gonna not use earphones then. Beautiful. All right. Let's get going. The audio is clearer with earphones. Oh no. Okay. Let's just stick with the loudness. Now it's scratchy. You guys, what do I do? I suck with technology. This is not the vibe. I need to get like a full like audio person if I can afford it in the future. Okay. I'm just gonna stick with without if that's okay. Just because it seems like it's the best for everybody. So, and if you have issues with the audio again, do let me know. All right. Bismillah. So let's get going. Okay. Now, something else to keep in mind is if a man is providing fully for the woman, he kind of does have a right over where she spends her time. Because again, she is responsible for his home. And basically like if he's contributing fully and he's doing his responsibilities, then basically the majority of her time, he will likely ask her to spend at home so that she can be the guardian of her husband's home, right? And his children. So that is just something to keep in mind that, you know, again, I didn't make this up. This is what I've heard from my Islamic finance seminars and from other scholars, and also from Sheikh Joe Bradford himself. He was just talking about, you know, if a man's providing fully, he has a right over where she kind of spends her time because he's doing his responsibility towards her, and she needs to be doing his responsibility towards him. Okay, but I actually had a man specifically once tell me when I told him, hey, like, you understand that my right is that you provide for me fully. And he was like, but I was like, I'm not sure about like wanting to do the cooking or the cleaning all the time. And he was like, well, no, it's your responsibility to do the cooking and the cleaning all the time. And I was like, technically it's not, it's up to interpretation, right? And especially since I had planned on contributing financially, even though I understood that he was going to contribute fully, right? So I just want to make sure you guys know that like you don't have to cook and clean per se. Like if a man tells you that, like that's not true. Okay. Now let's move on and talk about mahr. The husband has to provide the woman with a gift, okay, which is what's called mahr. It does not actually have to be money. This is a misconception. It doesn't have to be money. I actually heard of one story where the man was super poor and he couldn't afford mahr, right? And so his wife's mahr was she asked him to teach her tajweed, or how to recite Quran properly and to memorize Quran. And that was his gift to her because he couldn't give her material means, but he could give her something that's beautiful as that. So that's what they agreed upon, right? Mahr also doesn't have to be cash either, right? He can buy her a few stocks or shares of a company, right? Maybe he's like, oh, you know, I think Tesla is doing really well. I'm going to buy you a few stocks of Tesla, right? Or he can buy her real estate. He can give her like a house if he wants to, if he's, you know, wealthy. He can give her gold. It doesn't have to be cash. Now, if it is cash and it is money, mahr can either be upfront, or what is known as muqaddam, or deferred, mu'akhkhar, or both. You can have a portion that's muqaddam or upfront, or a portion that's deferred or mu'akhkhar. Now, why would you have mu'akhkhar? Why wouldn't you want to just all give it up, take it up front? The mu'akhkhar concept comes from this idea that should the woman go through a divorce or her husband dies, then she gets to claim her mu'akhkhar first. If he dies, it comes out of his estate first before inheritance is distributed. And if they divorce, then she's entitled to that mu'akhkhar in its entirety. It is a debt upon him that he needs to fulfill towards her. And the mu'akhkhar was really, really helpful, especially, you know, back in the day when women didn't work. And if they got divorced, then, you know, they were essentially not left with much. And so the mu'akhkhar was supposed to kind of tide them over until they got back on their feet. Okay. Now, there is no set amount or guidelines for mahr. People always ask me, like, how much should I ask for mahr? It's really up to you. There's no set amount. the Prophet ﷺ didn't put any restrictions on it. And there's actually even a story of the Khalifa Umar radiallahu anhu. There was one man who was complaining to the Khalifa, and he was telling him like, oh my God, this girl, she's asking for so much mahr. It's not fair. Can you put restrictions on mahr? And I think they were in a gathering. And then there was actually one woman who stood up in that gathering, and she was like, hey, the Prophet ﷺ never put any restrictions on mahr, so you can't put restrictions on mahr. And he was like, you know what, you're right. And he was like, we're gonna leave mahr open. So there really is no restriction. There's no guidelines. It's dependent on context, time, and place. Obviously, I would also look into a man's means when asking about mahr, right? I did also a piece of content about mahr a few months ago, and there was one woman who was like, oh, well, you know, if my husband's making 100K, I can ask him for 50K mahr. And I was like, I mean, yeah, you can, but he's not going to be able to afford 50K mahr, right? Because a man who's making 100K, he's probably getting destroyed by taxes, first of all. Second of all, he likely is saving for other things that will be required of a marriage. So he's probably saving to get a new home or a new car or new furniture. Furniture costs a lot of money. I would know. I'm looking for furniture right now. And likely he's also supporting other people in his life, whether it's his parents or his family or his sisters. So a man who's making 100K cannot afford 50K. Okay. I've linked a reel here that gives you kind of some guidelines about how to potentially think about approaching mahr and asking for mahr, but I just wanted to let you know there is no guidelines. All right. Okay, so we have a couple questions. Can you clarify when you say the woman is not obligated to cook and clean? So who do you mean should do it? Like hire a cleaner, for example? You could hire a cleaner, right? So again, it's all like up to interpretation between the couple. So for example, if you decide that you are going to contribute financially, and you might be working part-time or full-time because of that, and because of that you don't have time to cook and clean, then you can either hire somebody, or you might tell your husband like, hey, I'm also contributing to this household, so I don't want to do all the cooking or the cleaning, let's split it, right? It's really, there's no set example, like there's no set guidelines. It's really up to interpretation between the couple. Does that make sense? So Sadia says, I usually tell guys I'm talking to that I base my mahr on his income, mahr from a guy who makes 100K versus 1 million, as if proportionate to income. Yes. What ratio do you use? Sadia says 1 to 2 months of his yearly income after taxes. It's a significant amount to save, but not unreasonable and possible in my opinion. Yeah, that's a really, really good base, Sadia, actually. I think that's quite fair for a man. I once heard one scholar say you can do like, you can use percentage, right? So when you use percentage, which is very similar to what you're doing, Sadia, like something like 10% of someone's salary, using a percentage is much more, it's sliding scale, right? Because 10% of somebody making 150,000 is very different from someone making 50K, right? So there's no guidelines, right? It's really up to you to decide. And I do think this is a reel I made a few months ago about how to calculate mahr or think about going about it. And I think it might help you guys in the future, inshallah, if you want to check it out. We don't have time to go over it at the moment. How to determine a fair amount of mahr for both parties. So I think like you have to, you know, again, it's like look at his means, and then also look at what you want to do with the money, right? Sometimes like women are just like, well, I just want this amount. And it's like, well, do you know what you're going to do with this amount? Like, or do you just want this amount because it sounds cool? Like, oh yeah, I want a 20K mahr. Okay, what are you going to do with the 20K? Right? Are you going to put it towards buying a new car? Or do you want to go back to school and put it towards tuition? Do you want to invest some of it for a particular goal you have in the future? This is why I think financial literacy is really, really important for women, because it's like, if you know what you want to do with the money, then you kind of have a baseline for asking as well. Yeah, Nidis says in the Nikah Masterclass with Sheikh Jawar, he said he thinks 15 to 25K is a good amount. Yeah, and that's subjective. If you think that's too much, I had someone who was like, I can't ask that of my potential husband. It's too much. And I'm like, that's fair, right? So it's really hard to say. But the point of this slide is that there is no set amount or guidelines. So you choose what you want to do. You choose whether you want it to be all upfront or all deferred. And guidelines in terms of how to determine it. Look at the man's means and look at what you want to do with the money as well, right? Because I want to encourage most women to not just take that money and just put it in their bank, right? If you guys can mute yourself if possible, please. Thank you. Okay. So let's move on and talk about disclosure of assets. So do either the man or the woman have to disclose financial information, assets, debts to each other? So technically, Islamically, no. You never have to tell your husband how much you have in savings or how much you have in debt or if you have real estate. Does the man have to disclose to you? My understanding is no as well, unless it harms you in some way, shape, or form and would affect your relationship, right? Now, should you disclose information? In my opinion, probably. And if you want to do a prenuptial agreement, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, disclosure is required. Okay. Tasmina says, please use the headphone. Okay, let's try the headphone one more time and see if that sounds better, inshallah. Sorry about this, you guys.
Okay, is this all right? Okay, cool. Awesome. Great, awesome, great. Thank you. Okay, let's get going. So should you disclose assets? In my opinion, I think you should. And if you do a prenup agreement, you will have to disclose assets. It's part of the requirements of signing a prenup. Okay, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Okay, so this is where people might get upset because I'm going to debunk the myth of this whole his money is my money situation. I don't know where that started circulating around, but this is not a true statement. As a woman, you are entitled to the maintenance or nafaqah he gives you that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked him to give you during marriage, right? You are entitled to the dignified provision that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has asked him to give you. You're not entitled to all of the money in his bank account and to all of his assets automatically. This is not a true statement. Just because you marry a man, that doesn't mean anything that he had prior to marriage is suddenly yours, right? And the man also might have other responsibilities. He has responsibilities to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through zakat and through sadaqah. He has responsibilities to himself, right? He can spend on himself. He has responsibilities to his parents, especially if they're elderly, and especially if he's in a situation where he might be the only man. Like his, this is the situation with my family. Actually, I only have one brother, right? So he knows that he's kind of the majority of the responsibility for taking care of our parents is on him. He also will likely earn the most out of the three of us. So if he has unmarried sisters, he's also responsible for them. And he's also responsible to people he owes debts to. So this concept may rile some people up because I think like it's been going around so much and thrown around so casually and thrown around in jokes. But it's really not true, and it's actually really detrimental because it's giving women a sense of inflated entitlement that we are actually not allowed to have. You're entitled to the maintenance that the man gives you during the marriage. You don't necessarily get all of his money upon marriage. Now, his money or my money is my money. This is true, right? Your husband doesn't have a claim on your money. And so the accurate phrases should be is his money and my money is my money. But part of the his money is his money phrase, it has a stipulation that he has to provide from some of his money for his family, meaning you and your children, because that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked him to do, and he will be asked about that on the day of judgment. Whereas you don't have the stipulation for the my money is my money, right? Allah doesn't ask you to provide for your family from your money. This is a responsibility that he has placed entirely on the man. So this is something that he has to do, but your husband, for example, doesn't have to do other things like get pregnant or give birth, right? Like that's something that we have to do as women. Does that make sense? So I really want to get clear on this because I think when women go in with entitlement around this subject, it creates a lot of resentment and conflict. Is it more accurate to say some of his money is my money and my money is my money? Yeah, I would say that's a good way of thinking about it. Yeah, some of his money is my money and my money is my money is a very good way of thinking about it. Thank you for that, Nisa. Actually, I love that. Okay, now there is that. Are there any questions here before we move on? Because I'm going to move on to divorce rights and prenups. It's really, really important that we get this down. I will say this story that Chef Joe Bradford shared with me one day. He was talking about how, unfortunately, he saw 5 couples in the last year who the women were really hung up on this whole his money is my money statement. Even though those women were working, they didn't want to contribute financially to the household because they thought that all of their husband's money was their money. And then they refused to put in even a little bit, even though those 5 couples were all struggling financially. And 3 of those marriages ended in divorce because of this issue. So it's really, really important that like, you know what's up so that you don't run into that issue, right? Because I don't want you to get so like hung up on his money is my money to the point where it becomes detrimental to your marriage because the statement isn't even true to begin with. Okay. All right. All right, we're going to talk about divorce rights and prenups. Okay, so let's talk about the 3 types of divorce. Okay, there's 3 types of divorce in Islam. We have talaq, we have khula, and we have fasq. Okay, in talaq, talaq is the most common type of divorce. It's where the man initiates the divorce and is considered the breaching party. He basically says the marriage is over. He'll tell the woman you're divorced, or in Arabic, it'll be like inti taliq. And he can either say that by the written word or verbally. And then basically that initiates the divorce process. Okay. Now, the other type of divorce is the khula. This is where the woman removes herself from the marriage and it's considered the breaching party. She basically comes to the man and is like, hey, I don't like living with you. I want a divorce. And he's like, fine. She's the one who ends the marriage, and this is done by mutual consent. Now, the 3rd type is called fasq. This can happen from the man or the woman. So the man or the woman goes to an Islamic Sharia court and they say that their rights as a husband or a wife are not being upheld by the other party. And then the Islamic Sharia court looks at the case, and if they find that what that person is claiming is true, they will dissolve the marriage automatically. And this usually happens in the case of, for women, it happens in the case where a man is not spending on her like he's supposed to, or he's extremely abusive or whatnot. From the man's side, this can usually happen if he learns that the woman was untruthful in how she was kind of presented to him upon marriage, meaning she lied about being fertile. She has some kind of medical condition that affects, that might affect both of them. And there have been cases where this has happened in our Islamic history. And so he goes and basically he tells the Islamic court, like, hey, I was lied to. And then they dissolve the marriage. So this can happen for a variety of reasons. Those were just some examples I gave. We don't have time to get into like the nuances of the 3 types of divorce here. I would actually really encourage you to take the Nikah Masterclass to learn more about these in depth. There's going to be a cohort happening November 5th and 6th, which is next week. I'm not being sponsored by Nikah Masterclass. I just took the Nikah Masterclass and I thought it was really, really beneficial to know the differences between the 3 of these. So, all right, Bismillah. So let's get going. Now, in terms of the stages of divorce, we kind of have 3 initial stages, right? Initiation of divorce is step 1. So this is where the man or the woman initiates divorce through talaq or khula. Then we have the iddah period. This is a period of 3 months where the man and the woman are separated but official divorce hasn't set in. So during the iddah period, the man and the woman are still supposed to live together. And it's also a period of potential reconciliation to see if, like, you know, maybe something was said in a moment of anger, or maybe they just needed some time off. Maybe they just needed some time for anger to cool, whatever. And it's also to see if the woman is happens to be pregnant during this time, because sometimes a baby might bring two people together, right? Just as an FYI, if the man and the woman do have sexual intercourse during that iddah period, then that basically makes the whole divorce process null. And it's basically, you're not going to continue towards divorce. It's like you're reconciling, basically. When it comes to talaq, you have 3 talaqs, or a man has 3 talaqs. And then if you were to have sexual intercourse during that iddah period, basically it's like you've used up 1 talaq and now you have 2 more. Okay. I'm not going to go into the details of what all that means. This is not part of this masterclass. I just wanted to let you know that that existed. And then after that iddah period, let's say the 3 months pass, the man and the woman are separated. They don't reconcile. She's not pregnant. They don't have sex during this time. They're like, you know what? Khalas, like, we're over. I don't want to be your wife. I don't want to be your husband anymore. Then that's when divorce officially sets in, and that's when they're officially separated Islamically. The exception is fasq in this case. If you go to a Sharia court, then they immediately dissolve the marriage if they find that the case is valid. Okay. Yes, so Sadia says, definitely recommend all my ladies include a pronouncement of divorce in their nikah contract. That way you can initiate divorce if need be. I definitely agree with that. Thank you for mentioning that, Sadia. All right. So we have, so when it comes to mahr and divorce, when it comes to talaq, if the man initiates a talaq, then the woman gets to keep her mahr, right? Any mahr that she took up front, she gets to keep. And the man also has to pay the deferred mahr upon the dissolution of the marriage. Okay, it's considered a debt for him. Let's say she stipulated that her deferred mahr was going to be 20K. He has to pay her that 20K if he initiates talaq, right? If the two, however, divorce before the consummation of the marriage, then she does have to return the mahr, right? If they've consummated the marriage, then she gets to keep the mahr, and the man has to pay her the deferred mahr upon the dissolution of the marriage. All right. Now in a khula, because the wife is considered the breaching party here, the wife does repay some or all of her mahr back. This is something I would ask the scholar about more in depth. And because it can get a little tricky, it also depends on the situation and on context. But in general, it's kind of agreed upon that the wife has to repay something back of her mahr, because she's considered the breaching party and she's the one, literally, khula means to like literally remove yourself from a situation. She's the one removing herself from this marriage. Now let's talk about spousal maintenance, or this concept of child support and nafaqah. Now, when I'm talking about spousal maintenance, I'm only talking about the case of talaq here. There are different rules when it comes to khula, and we don't have time to get into it. And I also mentioned talaq because it's the most common type of divorce that you see. So in the case of talaq, the woman is entitled to maintenance during the iddah period. So if the man and the woman are still living together during the iddah period, it's a period of potential reconciliation. And if he was, spending on her food, her shelter, her clothes, her transportation, whatever, he has to maintain that fully. Whatever he was spending on her before talaq was initiated, he has to maintain that during those 3 months of the iddah period. Okay. After divorce sets in and the iddah period is over, she is not entitled to maintenance after the marriage. So she's not entitled to nafaqah, or what's known as alimony in the West. Okay, a lot of women are like, oh, does he get to spend on me after we're done being married? And you are not entitled to spousal maintenance or alimony post divorce, because that man is no longer responsible for you, right? She goes back to being the responsibility of her mahrams or her other male relatives, whether it's her dad or her brother or her uncles. and that man is no longer responsible for that woman. He now can go and marry someone else, and he's going to be responsible for that other woman after her. So once you kind of cut ties with a man, he's no longer responsible for you. Now, if you have children together, he is obligated to pay child support, both, you know, in the Western court system and Islamically, right? He has to pay child support, and a portion of that child support is to provide for the person who is caring for the children, whether that be their mother, their grandmother, a nanny, whatever. So, you know, let's say the amount that is determined by child support has to include whatever is to provide for that person who's caring for the children, to keep that person alive so that they can stay alive, so that they can take care of the children, right? If you two were married, you get divorced, and you don't have children together, then you are not entitled to spousal maintenance. You're not entitled to alimony, okay? Your relationship with that man is over, basically. Neda says, what do you mean by that? Include what? Neda, what are you referring to? I'm not sure what you're referring to, but if Sadia's comment. Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, so the pronouncement of divorce, I believe what she's talking about is, I could be wrong. So if Sadia, you want to jump in, I think it's talking about you stipulating that you can do the khula in your nikah, that you can remove yourself from the marriage, basically. Yeah. Safa, do you have a question?
Hi, assalamu alaikum. I
Walaikum
just
salam.
wanted to clarify what myself and Sadi were talking about.
Yeah,
So it's
sure.
usually different from khula, and it's something I'd recommend every woman does. So essentially it's called talaq al-tafweed. So if you, in your nikah contract, say, I have the right to talaq al-tafweed, or I have the right to divorce exactly as my husband has the right to divorce, then you can essentially divorce your husband the same way he can divorce you, i.e. verbally or in writing.
Oh, yes,
etc., etc. And in that sense, you don't have to give up any of your mahar. You don't have to give up anything, because the right is the same as the man.
Right,
so I would recommend that every woman includes that.
Yes, you're right. Yeah. That's a good differentiator. Thank you, Safa. I appreciate it.
Jazakallah, no worries.
Yes, what Safa said. Go, Safa. I love that. I think Sadia put it up, or Safa put it up. Talaq at-tafweed, right? She put it up in the
Yeah, that's what it is. I'll type it again if people have missed it.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on. Okay. So we talked about the whole his money is my money, sorry, and how that's not true, right? So this concept of splitting 50-50 upon divorce, this is what got a lot of people mad as well in the prenup reel. I just want to go back and say, like, this is not an Islamic concept. This is a concept created by the West. Splitting property 50-50 after divorce, it comes from the concept of what's called marital property or joint matrimonial assets, okay? AKA the assumption that upon marriage, money, assets, and property gains during the duration of the marriage is considered to be the joint property of both people, right? And the concept is that if it's joint property of both people, then a 50-50 split is fair. Now, I don't know the background about the concept of marital property or joint matrimonial assets. What I can say is that my understanding of marriage in Christianity is that, you know, the two become one, basically, upon marriage. We don't necessarily have this concept of the two become one upon marriage. And so this concept of the two become one upon marriage might have influenced this whole marital property situation. But we don't have this concept that automatically when two people get married, any money, assets, and property gained during the duration of the marriage is considered to be the joint property of both people. This is not a concept that we have in Islamically, right? In Islam, because we talked about how in Islam, each person's money is their own. we don't have the concept of default marital property Islamically, meaning upon divorce, you don't automatically get 50% of your husband's money, and neither does he. Okay. Aisha says, I was curious where you live. I live in California in the US. Okay. So a lot of objections that I encountered when it comes to this whole splitting 50-50 thing, I'm going to address right now. So a lot of people were like, oh, well, you know, Islamic law says we follow the law of the land. So if we follow the law of the land, then we need to follow the splitting 50-50 thing. So we follow the law of the land only when the law of the land doesn't contradict Islamic law, right? Islamic law comes first. And so we don't have this concept of default marital property Islamically because it's harmful to both parties, right? And we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but Islamic law comes first. And so we try and follow Islamic law, and we follow the law of the land when it's not in contradiction with Islamic law. The other objection that I got is the women who say they stayed home and took care of the kids, and it's not fair they don't get to take 50% of the man's money. I'm going to hit y'all with some tough love right now. You deciding to stay home and not have any source of income or revenue as a woman is a personal decision that you made or that you decide to make. You choosing not to work doesn't mean you automatically are entitled to 50% of your man's wealth. And just because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told you you don't have to work doesn't mean you shouldn't, or it doesn't mean you shouldn't have some way to prepare to be financially secure in some way, right? That doesn't mean you have to work per se, but maybe you stipulate that any property that you gain during the marriage, you're like, I want both of our names on it so that we do get to split it after divorce. Or I want you as my husband. If I'm staying home, I need you to pay me like a weekly salary or whatever. Or you start investing in the stock market so that you have some sort of money while you're not working, right? Your money's being worked for you. So you not working is like what Allah has given you, but it's kind of like the bare minimum. And in today's society, it may not be the smartest decision for you. A man's responsibility towards you, what he has to provide in nafaqah towards you, does not negate your own financial responsibility towards yourself as an adult. As an adult, you need to find your own way of making and having money. So I think there's a lot of like cruising, unfortunately, that I see sometimes in the Muslim community where women are just like, yeah, like my husband will take care of it. And then the reality is like your marriage might not last, whether that's due to divorce or death. And then you didn't take care of your own financial responsibility towards yourself as an adult. Your husband is responsible to making sure on a day-to-day basis, you are alive, right? You have a roof over your head, you have food on the table, etc. You have, money to pay for gas to get to places you need to go. But he's not responsible for your own financial security long term. Like that's not part of his responsibility towards you, right? You have your own financial responsibility towards yourself and as an adult. And so this is why I want to start having these conversations, because I think like I want women to be more intentional when they make the decision to stay home and figure out like, okay, I'm going to stay home, which is totally your right. But it's like, how do you find other ways of making money or having money to fulfill your own financial responsibility towards yourself as an adult woman? Okay. Does that make sense? Beautiful. So I do have to say that, so women get upset sometimes because they're like, well, it's not fair. Well, that was a personal decision that you made, right? Because you taking 50% of that man's wealth is unfair to him because first of all, his money is his money. And second of all, that might cripple him in being able to, first of all, even provide you child support, which he has to give you. And second of all, he is also entitled to remarry after you. But you taking 50% of his money might really cripple that, right? I'm really glad you're talking about this. I feel empowered. Alhamdulillah. Yeah, exactly. the other thing that I want to talk about is like when people say Islamic, people have said like, this isn't fair. Islamic law is not fair. And here the underlying assumption behind this comment is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't know what's up and he's not just, astaghfirullah, right? The reality is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most wise and he literally created us and he created this planet and he knows more than us. To think that Western law is more fair than Allah's law is, no offense, it's ludicrous, right? There are a lot of things we may not understand in Islam, but that's part of the submission of being Muslims. Like, I'll be very frank with you. I talked about this on a live the other week. Like, I struggle with the concept of Hajj. I'm just like, if you really think about Hajj, we're just going around a big rock. If you want to strip it down to bare bones, right? And for me, I'm like, I really struggle with this concept of like sa'i, tawaf. I struggle with even the concept of throwing the symbolic stones at the devil or whatever. And I'm just like, well, I don't get Hajj. I don't understand, but Allah knows more than I do. So I'm just going to trust him. And this doesn't just have to do with Hajj or even this concept. It has to do with everything in Islam. Sometimes there are things we don't understand. But I think what happens is when you understand that Allah is the most just and he's the most wise, and there are some things we're not going to understand, that's okay, right? We have limited knowledge as Muslims. Now that's not to encourage you not to ask questions. Obviously, like Islam encourages asking questions and understanding what you don't understand, but I was really upset last week when I saw people saying Islamic law isn't fair, right? Because Allah knows more than we do. So we may not understand why, but we have to know that it is fair and the most just ultimately. Okay. So with that being said, I've also noticed kind of a double standard situation here, right? So sometimes women are very particular about wanting their money to be their money according to the Sharia, right? As in they definitely don't want a man to get 50% of their money in a divorce, right? But then suddenly they want to apply Western law and take 50% of the man's assets upon divorce. So it's like we can't pick and choose where we apply Sharia, right? Either you don't apply Sharia at all and you just go with the Western law of splitting 50-50, or you go with the Sharia fully and neither of you gets 50% of each other's assets, right? As they say, you can't have your cake and eat it too. This is a double standard. And I think a lot of people are not realizing that this is a double standard, right? If you don't want your man to take 50% of your money according to the Sharia, then you're also not entitled to 50% of his money according to the Sharia. You can't apply to Sharia to your money and then Western law to his money. It doesn't work like that, right? Okay. Marital property, FYI, the whole marital property concept also assumes that debt is shared either 50-50 or equitably, okay? So it's not all fun and games. I think people forget that debt is also considered, like any debt that is acquired during the marriage is also considered 50-50. So for example, if you and your husband were married, he was in medical school while you guys were married, and he accrued a lot of medical school debt, then that it also falls upon you to pay off should a divorce happen, right? So marital property is not all fun and games. People are like, yeah, I want 50% of my husband's money. And it's like, okay, well, do you want 50% of his debt too? Because that's also the vibe, right? Is like you get both assets and debt. The concept of marital property and matrimonial assets, most Western countries have it. Okay. In the US, community property states have it. So these are Arizona, California, Idaho, Louisiana, Nevada, New Mexico, Texas. There's like 9 states that have it. In the other states, marital property may not be split 50-50 exact, but it may be split equitably instead of equally. Okay. Sounds good. So Hiba has to leave us. She has another meeting. Thank you for being here, Hiba. I appreciate it. Okay, let's get going. So let's talk about to prenup or not, which is the title of this class, right? So what is a prenup? It is a legal document that is an agreement of how you will divide assets upon divorce, right? And also during the marriage. In this document, you can specify which property will be joint and which will be separate. So as Muslims, a prenup is how we practice the Sharia when it comes to division of assets upon divorce, right? It's basically a way to specify that each person's property during marriage will be their own by default, unless they both agree that some things will be joint. So for example, if you both agree that your home will be joint property, that maybe you decide some retirement accounts will be joint, some investment accounts will be joint, etc. Right? Unless you specify that some things will be joint, the default is that each person's property during marriage will be their own. And this is in agreement with the whole, his money is his money, my money is my money, right? Every person's property is their own. This document can be upheld in court. Unfortunately, nikah contracts are not upheld in a Western court, FYI, because it's not considered a fair legal document. Can prenups be thrown out in court? Yes, they can, or they may not be considered, but I would say it's better to have it than to not have it at all. You can only sign a prenup if you're doing a legal or civil marriage, right? So if you decide, in addition to your nikah, you're also going to get married legally and you're going to register it with the state. You can't have a prenup if you're choosing to do a nikah only marriage. So if you're just like, I don't want, the UK government or the US government to know that I got married Islamically, and you just do a nikah only marriage, you can't sign a prenup. Okay, it has to go with a legal marriage. Yeah, I'll head to questions at the end, inshallah. I just want to keep going for the sake of time. Okay, prenup requirements. So how do you sign a prenup? So you need to get an attorney. Each party, the man and the woman, need to hire their own attorney to draft the prenup. So you need an attorney as a woman and he needs an attorney as a man. Full disclosure. So if you are going to sign a prenup, you need to fully disclose your assets, debts, and properties to the other person. So this person's going to know that you have this much and you're going to know that he has this much. And it's basically to have a fair understanding of like, this is what each person is coming in with. So that no one feels, this is again from a Western concept, right? It's like no one feels duped, right? No one feels like they're being lied to or taken advantage of. Everybody knows what's up, right? Then you're going to specify your property, right? You're going to decide which property will be joint and which will be separate, right? So you're going to say like, this property is going to be, the default is each person's property is going to be separate, unless we specifically specify that it's going to be joint. And then the last thing you should think about is using legal language. So you're going to use the legal language of the prenup to practice Islamic law. So basically that's how you're not actually going to say like this prenup is going to be according to Islamic law. You're never going to mention Islamic law in the prenup, but you're just going to use the legal language of the prenup to practice and protect Islamic law. Okay. Can they hide how much money they really have in the prenup? Who's verifying for accuracy? That's a really good question. I think that is a question that would be better suited for an attorney. I'm not sure how they would verify for accuracy, to be honest with you. I've never signed a prenup. But my understanding is they may actually ask you to disclose like your bank statements and stuff. So I'm not sure. Why would a court throw out a prenup if that's what you said is recognized by the court? So this is a good question. Sometimes a court may throw out a prenup if they think that the expectations coming into the marriage changed during the marriage. Meaning, let's say you married someone who's like very poor, right? And then this person, and then when he disclosed his information to you pre-marriage, he was very poor, right? And he didn't have like very much in his bank account. And so when you signed the prenup, you're like, okay, well, this person doesn't have a lot of money, so it's fine. Well, what might happen is, what if this person, he gets married and throughout the marriage, he opens a very successful business and he becomes a millionaire, right? And then divorce happens. And then as a woman, you might be like, and again, I'm talking from a very Western perspective here. I'm not talking about Islam. A woman from the Western perspective might be like, well, when I married him, he was dirt poor and he was broke. and now he's like a millionaire. And so I signed the prenup with the understanding that he was going to be dirt poor. But now that he's a millionaire, things are different, right? The game has changed. And so the court might be like, that's a valid point. We're going to throw out this prenup because what you signed it with one expectation and the expectations have shifted dramatically. This is what one of my friends who's an attorney has told me now. But this doesn't happen very often. Like this usually will happen in very extreme cases where obviously if you go from being dirt poor to being a millionaire, that's like a very drastic change. But in general, most people aren't going to have those significant jumps in income during marriage, right? You're usually getting married knowing kind of the earning potential of your spouse. Does the prenup also include any debts prior to the marriage be separated too? Yes, you can also include that any debts prior to the marriage be separated as well. Yes. So it's about assets and debts, inshallah. Okay. This concept of prenup and alimony, we talked about how we don't really have the concept of alimony post-divorce, which is nafaqah or spousal maintenance. But a prenup allows you to specify and protect your deferred meher if you specified any, right? If you specified that you want some deferred meher, a prenup allows you to protect that. So what you're going to be doing is using the legal language of alimony or spousal maintenance to specify your deferred meher. So the prenup will probably say something like, this document specifies that alimony upon divorce will be in the amount of $15,000. That $15,000 is your deferred meher. So you're going to use the word alimony instead of deferred meher because deferred meher doesn't, like, they don't know what that means in Western court, right? So instead of using deferred meher as a term, you're just going to use the word alimony, but this isn't alimony, right? This is your deferred meher, which you have a right to and you're entitled to should divorce happen, right? And this is really important because if you just put your deferred meher in your nikah contract, there is no legal way to obligate the man to pay you your deferred meher should divorce happen, right? Putting it in a prenup will legally obligate him to pay you that $15,000, that deferred meher, because as far as the courts are concerned, this is alimony and he's required to pay the alimony that you guys agreed upon, which for you is your deferred meher. Does that make sense? And if I were you, I would elect to have your deferred meher amount be adjusted for inflation in the future. I'll tell you like the story of my own mom. Unfortunately, like she obviously didn't specify that her deferred meher will be adjusted for inflation. Should my dad, and she got married, you know, almost 30 years ago at this point. Her meher is worth very little now, right? Should my dad and her get divorced now, yes, she's entitled to her deferred meher, but it's like pennies, which is really unfortunate. And she also came from, you know, her meher was specified in the Syrian lira at the time, which has also lost a lot of value to inflation. So she would basically be ending up with nothing now, right? Which is really unfortunate. And I don't want you to find yourself in that situation. How do you adjust for inflation in terms of the calculation? I think you can just say something as like, you want it to be adjusted for inflation. And then there are calculators that help you figure out like, you know, 20K in 2015, what is that going to be worth in 2030? You know, there are calculators that help you do that. You don't necessarily have to do the exact calculation. You can just say, I want it to be adjusted for inflation. And the reason I say this is because what I just want you to keep, people were saying like, oh, this is haram, like you can't do that. But I'm like, well, not really, because this is an opportunity for you to preserve the amount that you both agreed on, right? If he agreed to $15,000 as your deferred meher, he needs to pay you the value of $15,000. If he ends up paying you $15,000 in 15 years, that $15,000 is not the same as it was 15 years ago. So he's not actually paying you the value that you guys agreed upon, right? Which is not fair to you. So this is just something for you to consider, because I've seen a lot of women who didn't think about this, and it's like they're kind of like relying on their deferred meher to help them, you know, get themselves back on their feet post-divorce. And then they're like, well, this, you know, this 5K or this 10K, it doesn't mean much these days the way it did 10, 20 years ago, right? So that's just something for you to consider. Okay. I'm gonna wrap up the masterclass by talking about splitting bills, right? I want to talk about this concept of bare bones and being pedantic, right? So, like we talked about, the Islamic rights to marriage are pretty bare bones, right? He has a right to give you, to spend on you financially, and you're the guardian of his home, and that's pretty much up to interpretation. There's not really a lot, and he has to give you mahar. But besides that, there's not really a lot of like very specifics and very specific guidelines, right? A lot of it is really just up to interpretation and agreement between the couple. But I will say, like, as Muslims, we're not really encouraged to be extremely pedantic and petty, right? Marriage is a partnership. You're a team, so you're encouraged to look at it from that aspect. We generally shouldn't be stripping marriage down solely to rights, because if you're gonna like be like, this is my right and this is your right, that strips a lot of the mawadda and the rahma that is also supposed to be part of marriage, right? So with that being said, contributing financially as a woman, you obviously don't have to, but if you can, remember that it's an honor, it's a privilege, and a sadaqah to be able to contribute to your family. Remember that our mother Khadija radiallahu anha, like, she basically funded the majority of the Islamic da'wah in the first 10 years because she was wealthy, and it was an honor and a privilege for her to be able to do that. And it's a beautiful thing. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed you with money and you want to contribute to your family, it's a really, really beautiful thing. And again, I don't want you to be in that situation where we talked about those couples where the woman was so hung up on her money is her money and the whole his money is my money situation, to the point where they were unwilling to contribute even a little bit. And it eventually led to the destruction of their marriages and their families, right? Also, you and your spouse may want an elevated lifestyle, and you can also achieve that by working as a team. So you might look at a man and be like, well, his means are okay. He doesn't necessarily provide me with the lifestyle that I want, but alhamdulillah, I went to university, I got a degree, I'm planning on working for a few years, so I do want to contribute so we can have a nicer lifestyle and enjoy our lives together as a team, right? So here are some different approaches to figure out financial contributions to the household. So the first approach is, you know, very, very basic, right? Here we have the husband fully takes on the entire finances of the house, and the woman decides not to contribute financially. And even in this case, when you decide not to work or contribute financially, I would still encourage women to find some way to make money here, utilize remote job opportunities, do some tutoring, find some way of passive income, invest in the stock market, specify that you want the man to give you a salary, right? Find some way to make money. Again, this is to protect your financial responsibility towards yourself as an adult, okay? The other approach that I've seen is the husband pays for essentials. So he takes care of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has asked him to take care of, which is food, shelter, transportation, clothing, insurance, etc., like the basics and the essentials. And then the woman decides to take care of the extra things that will really elevate the lifestyle that they have as a couple. So this might be like if they decide to put their kids in Islamic school, in private school, that might be really expensive. If they decide to go on vacations, if she decides to pay for private tutoring, Quran classes, for example. So my mom is a Quran teacher, and she does a lot of, you know, tutoring for private tutoring for kids. And in a lot of the conversations she's had with those women, like the women are the ones paying for those Quran classes, not the husbands, because the husbands, it's not within their ability to pay for those classes, right? And it's not necessarily a need also. It's not necessarily something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has asked the man to provide for. So the woman's like, hey, I'm working, you take care of the basic things, that's fine. I want my kids' lives to be elevated. I want them to learn Quran, I want them to learn Tajweed, so I'm gonna take care of that. Totally legit and valid way of doing things. I've had conversations with men, by the way, about this approach, and they're totally down with it. So you might just need to broach the subject because this may not be, you know, something that they have considered. The third approach is you do a split that feels fair to both of you percentage-wise. So if, for example, if the man makes more, then he might pay for 70% of household expenses and the woman would pay for 30%. If the woman makes the same or she makes more than him, a 50-50% 50-50 split might be more reasonable when it comes to bills. There's no right or wrong way of doing this. It's all up to you, and you guys can figure this out, right? So sometimes I've also seen this in situations where, you know, let's say like the woman does make more than the man, and then they're like, okay, let's figure out a split that's a little bit more fair, right? And then the fourth approach is what a lot of people tend to do in the West. And if you want to do this, this is totally fine. Both spouses decide to pool their entire incomes together into one income and go from there. They both put in 100%, meaning if you make 100K, he makes 100K, you now are a 200K household, and you're operating your lifestyle as a 200K household, which is also fine if you want to do that. Okay. I want to kind of conclude by saying I really want you to do some deep reflections here about what you're comfortable with, what you prefer, what kind of lifestyle do you want? How do you envision your life? Do you envision wanting to work? Do you envision not wanting to work? Do you want to be taken care of fully? Do you want to work for a couple of years and then maybe go part-time if you have kids? Or take some time off for a couple years and then get back into the workforce. If you decide not to work at all, how are you going to find some way to make money? And, you know, list out these preferences and talk to them. Talk to your potential or current spouse about them, right? And if you guys bristle or disagree initially, I want you to think about your spouse's expectations and then figure out how you can compromise. Right? Remember that you're a team at the end of the day, and if two people want to find a way to make it work, they will. Right? I will say, regardless of which approach you take, you should both have a separate bank account and a joint bank account for household expenses. Right? Joint bank account is where all the household expenses comes out of for the house, and then separate bank accounts is, you know, whatever money he wants to keep for himself, savings he has for himself, money he wants to send to his family. Same thing for you. Whether you have access to each other's separate bank accounts is also a discussion between you two. So I know some couples who are like, yeah, my husband doesn't need to know what I'm doing, so I'm not going to give him access to my bank account, which is fine. Or you're like, I don't really care. He can have access to my bank account and I can have access to his, and it's okay. So this is really up to you. I think if you guys will notice, the theme of this masterclass is, again, like, let's go back here. Islamic rights to marriage are pretty bare bones, right? There's not that many guidelines. So at the end of the day, it's what you two decide to do. And it's what you guys talk about pre-marriage, or even in the marriage, that will help you live a comfortable lifestyle together and figure out what you want, right? And you'll be in agreement. Does that make sense? I wish we had more concrete examples of married couples being vulnerable about what they're doing and how it works for them. That's a really, really good point. I think it's hard. It's really hard for couples to share this stuff because we're really not encouraged to talk about money. I don't know if you guys have noticed this. Yesterday, I did a whole live about why I paid my current business coach $9K to continue working with her. And I wanted to have that conversation because I'm like, we never talk about money. We never talk about spending money. People don't want to share. People are very much like, they're so scared of hasad and nazar to the point where it's like, I actually think it's detrimental to our community because there's so much secrecy to the point where like, we don't even know what is happening. Like people aren't sharing resources with each other. And it's really unfortunate. I was able to glean some information from some married women when I did a couple marriage circles a few months ago. I compensated those women, and I think it was like the trust that they had with me that they were able to open up about their situation. But in general, like people don't want to open up. People don't want to talk about money. People are really scared about hasad and nazar. But I think starting to have these conversations through spaces like this and is really important, because then like you guys will leave this space, you'll go talk to your friends, you'll go talk to your cousins. And then when people are more comfortable talking, then inshallah, more of these examples can come out, right? Okay. If you have a joint account and a separate personal account, do you have to tell your husband what you spend out of your own separate account if he asks? No, you don't. Or does he have to tell you what he spends out of his personal separate account? No, he doesn't have to tell you either, right? And this comes from you guys don't have to disclose your information to each other. There is a taboo around even discussing it during courting. Neither wants to know or how to bring the topic up. Yeah, which is, you know, really, really unfortunate. But again, I think the more we have these conversations, the more, inshallah, people will become comfortable talking about it. I'm really actually glad that the prenup, out of all the reels and all the content that could have gone viral, I'm really glad the prenup one went viral because there are more people talking about prenups now, right? Which is great. I mean, how people feel about it is a different thing, but at least we're starting to have these conversations. And I think you guys, having attended this masterclass, like, start talking about these things with your friends. You know, if one of your friends is telling you she's getting married or she's talking to someone, be like, hey, ask him about these things, right? Like, tell your friends, tell your families, this is how we get the ball rolling. Yeah. So with that being said, I'm just going to take a minute to invite you guys to, if you want to deepen this conversation and go more in depth, to think about joining the Let's Talk Money Honey program. So this is a 2-week live and pre-recorded program, and it's really meant to help you figure out how to have these conversations with a lot of nuance and with emotional intelligence, which is why I'm actually bringing marriage coach Miriam to the program. So this program is for someone who's either single or married or engaged, and you want to feel confident and empowered financially coming into your marriage. You want to understand what questions to ask and which financial issues are deal breakers or red flags. You want to learn how to resolve conflict around money in an emotionally intelligent way. You want to know how to take the steps to be prepared in the case of divorce. And you want to have deeper self-awareness and knowledge of their own money expectations and behaviors for married life. It's going to begin October 24th, inshallah. You will have lifetime replay access if you can't attend live. And like I mentioned, there's going to be a guest speaker session by the amazing Maria marriage coach at Mariam Arafat. She is going to talk about emotional intelligence and conflict resolution. She's really great. Like, I can't stop raving about her. If you follow her Instagram and you see the types of results she gets her clients, like, she literally has clients who go from like hating their husbands to having a beautiful and loving relationship with their husbands. And I'm like, how do you do it? Like, she's a miracle worker. MashaAllah, Allahumma barik. Literally, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I would literally run, not walk to her session if I were you. And I think her session is worth the entire cost of the program. So the fact that she has agreed to come speak with us is amazing. She's also going to be attending the Q&A at the end of the program. If you have questions for her specifically, there's going to be a Facebook group to accompany this program to create community and to ask questions. I'm going to open it to both men and women because I would love to have men joining this conversation because they are the other half of this equation. I don't know how many men will join. We'll see. If a man joins, that'll be super baller of him, to be honest. The price is currently on early bird for 444, and it's going to go up to 555 on the 20th. So you have 1 week. If you want to sign up, DM me on Instagram or wait for the follow-up email that will have the replay of this masterclass. There's also a VIP upgrade. I'm going to be doing 3 couple strategy sessions, which is like if you are currently engaged or you're married and you actually want to like have a facilitator to help you have these conversations. That's what I'll be doing, inshallah. So the first session will be to talk about getting clear on money expectations and behaviors. The second session will be about organizing and managing your money together. And then the third session will be a follow-up to check in and adjust 1 month after the second session. This is for engaged or married couples, and the upgrade is $750 if you take the Let's Talk Money Honey program. And normally they're going to be $1,100 for the 3 sessions, but you get them cheaper with the program. So if you want to upgrade, do DM me. Let's see, how much time do we have? Oh, we're kind of out of time. All right, well, let's see if there's any last minute questions I can kind of answer. Can you share more about the number and length of sessions over the 2 weeks and dates/times? Yes, so I think it's going to be 3 sessions per week, 3 live sessions over the 2 weeks, and they're probably going to be an hour to an hour and a half. The dates and times, I can't recall off the top of my head right now. Please DM me on Instagram. But yeah, it's going to be inshallah. If we attended the Nikah Masterclass previously, can we join again for the next cohort, or do we have to pay again for it? I'm actually not sure. I think you would have to talk to the Nikah Masterclass organizers in that case. I'm not sure, you guys. But I would definitely recommend the Masterclass. It was really, really helpful. Okay. Any last minute questions? Dude, some cultures make it taboo to even ask for more than $100 for Meher because she's too high maintenance. Yeah, we need to not vibe with those conversations anymore. Like it's just not fair. And that's not how what Islam says. So yes, Ellen, you have a question? Sorry, I actually don't know what your name is.
No problem. Hi, it's Lola. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for this session. It was really helpful. And my question was just about like, so if you know, the husband or the wife, if during, I guess, let's say, during the marriage, she sort of like changes her mind about something, or they had agreed about something like 10 or 20 years ago, and then the financial situation changes, or, you know, they're getting along as a married couple, but there's something. Can the couple rewrite the nikah? Like, is that a thing? Or the prenup? Like, can they update the documents and to like accommodate the current situation? If
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah, so I'm not sure about the nikah. I think that's a question best suited for a scholar, but I think the prenup, there is an agreement called the postnup, right? Which is basically the same kind of agreement as a prenup, but you just do it after the marriage. So basically what you do is potentially you might just go and sign a postnup instead, and you can invalidate the previous document as well. So inshallah.
Okay, thank you. Jazakallah
Yeah,
khair.
of course, of course. So for the sake of time, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up today's masterclass. I will send you guys the link with the replay in case you want to watch it. Thank you so much for this class. Alhamdulillah, I'm so glad it was informative and helpful for you guys, inshallah. If you want to join Let's Talk Money Honey, I would love to see more of you so we can have deeper conversations about this, inshallah. With that being said, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you where I see you, inshallah. Salams, everyone.